Welcome to Containerized Conversations, where we try to containerize our conversation. I'm Jessica Caffarelli.
And I'm Josh Warhurst. Thanks for tuning in as we dive into some of our favorite topics, one containerized thought at a time.
Habit 5. Yeah, so our this is our book series. If you haven't picked up the book yet, if you haven't read it, I mean, you can still listen to our podcast, but you probably should actually read the book first. It'll probably be more powerful. But we're on Habit 5 on this episode. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. So that's spoilers ahead. If you haven't read it, go read it. If you don't want to read it, then just listen ahead.
So,
all right, Josh.
Seek first to understand, then be understood. I think I'll try to summarize this really quickly, which is it's really important to listen to the other person.
Yeah.
Before you actually go into one of these quote unquote like win-win situations. So we have to actually understand other people truly on a deep level before we can actually interact with them in a positive way.
Yep.
So,
which is interesting because it's after win-win.
Yeah,
but
I it's really interesting that this is habit 5 instead of being habit 4.
Yeah.
I think the reason that they did this was to give, so win-win is habit 4, which is, if you remember from last time, it's, we should make sure that the people that we're doing deals with, we're gaining something out of it and they're gaining something out of it.
Yeah.
And that's the best kind of working with other people, especially with deal making. I think that seek first to understand, then to be understood, habit 5, comes after, because you almost have to have a goal into going into understanding another person. Like, why are you understanding people? I believe fundamentally it is really important to understand other people. I think that it's one of the great joys in life is trying to understand other people.
Yeah.
But I think for the sake of it, some people might say, well, why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Right? What's in it for me? Right? And what's in it is win-win. It's the habit 4. That's the end goal. So I think that's kind of how this came about. That's my understanding. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this whole chapter is really teaching you the tools to try to understand someone. And I think he does a really good job of saying when to use this habit. It's really when you're dealing with emotionally charged situations. I think one thing he mentions is here is like, you wouldn't use this when someone comes up to you and says, do you know where the bathroom is? I have to go really bad. And you respond, let me get this right. You have to go to the bathroom. Like, you don't need to seek to understand in those situations. So like that's what this habit is. And for me, I mentioned this in one of our previous episodes. This was, I actually think this is probably one of the bigger habits that I would say like changed who I was and gave me, I guess, what I would call the biggest paradigm shift, the biggest perspective change. Because, and maybe it was just because I was really bad at seeking to understand before being understood. And maybe I still am. Maybe I'm still working on it. And so I think with this habit, it is probably one of my more favorite habits. This one and then the last one. What about you?
Why? Well, I'm going to ask you a question. Why do you think it was, what were you trying to do before that this habit kind of made you realize was doing, you were doing wrong? Or maybe it was just the lack of this habit?
I mean, yeah, I was doing exactly what, he was saying people did badly. When I talked to people, and especially like in emotionally charged situations where you're like debating things, and let's say for instance you are very passionate about one thing and this other person is opposing you in a very passionate way too. In those specific conversations, Yeah, I did exactly one of the things he mentioned, which is I was not listening to the person. I was trying to formulate my response
Yeah.
in my head, you know, uh, while they were talking. So I
Right.
wasn't actually listening. And if I did listen, it was only to formulate a response. It wasn't actually in any way, shape, or form to try to understand their point of view. It wasn't to try to understand like what their paradigm was or
Mhm.
how they saw how they I wasn't trying to understand how they were seeing an old lady,
Uh-huh.
right? I was seeing a young lady and I was gonna convince them this is obviously a young lady. Like I wasn't trying to understand how they were seeing an old one, right? And so,
Yeah.
um, and so when I started reading this and started understanding, my big draw was I wanted to be understood.
Yeah.
Like, why is it that I have such a hard time being understood? And I think the big thing that hit me with when I first read this chapter was the story he was talking about where the guy was like, "Hey, this person never listens. I don't understand. They're not changing their ways." And then he responds, "Well, why don't you do this work to understand them?" And he's like, "That's too much work." And
Yeah.
he's like, "Oh, so you want them to change, but you're not willing to put in the work to change yourself?" And I think that was like kind of like that aha moment where I was like, okay, like, yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna make something that is probably too big of a statement. I think about this because I have a young child. But a lot of us are born into this world with like very limited abilities to communicate. And we keep trying to build this up. And usually when people don't understand what we're saying, I need to actually become better at explaining it to them. I need to
yeah,
develop the words. I need to do something on my part so that they'll understand.
yep,
But when you become an adult, a lot of people have most of the faculties to actually explain themselves. What they're lacking is the piece that the other person brings to the table, which is their understanding, right? The other person's understanding. So this ends up being the big factor that a lot of people end up missing, right? That they've been working on themselves their entire life. How
yeah,
do I explain myself? Not thinking, who is my audience? You could think of it selfishly and say, how do I get them to understand me?
yeah,
But you can also just go and say, I want to understand them. And then maybe by being influenced by their situation, I'll actually come to a new conclusion that is kind of win-win, right? It's a argument that maybe my ideas will be changed by understanding them,
you
right?
nailed it. Yeah, no, I mean that's exactly it. We we grow up learning how to formulate our own ideas, but a lot of us don't learn how to um get people bought into that idea.
Mhm.
And I think that's why this chapter is really strong. And that's I do have to say when I first read this chapter, I was being selfish, just like you said. I was trying to figure out how to, convince people that of my way of thinking. But
Mhm.
you're totally right. Once you start inhabiting this habit, what naturally ends up happening is you do open yourself for influence too. And more times than and it might even be more times than not, you're not actually convincing other people your standpoint.
Mhm.
You're actually understanding their side of it more and going, "You know what? I was actually wrong." Because that's what I find that actually ended up happening to me was the more I actually tried to inhabit this habit, the more I found myself actually caving into my side because I was missing some sort of, you know, viewpoint or paradigm that I didn't originally understand.
They talk about how all the habits are self-reinforcing.
Yeah.
You practice
Yeah.
some of these and they'll help you with the other ones. You need to make yourself stronger
Yeah.
before you go out and to have better relationships with other people.
Yeah.
I think this is one of those where if you're coming from a place where you are already confident as a person,
Yeah.
you understand who you are, what you're trying to do and get out of life,
Yeah.
it becomes a lot easier to listen to other people because you're coming from that base, right? That
Yeah.
stronghold where you say, "Hey, I'm confident that what I'm thinking is coming from some good place," right?
Yeah.
Let's understand somebody else, and if I end up being influenced and change my goals, it's still from a place of, um,
Yeah.
wanting to better myself and better life, right? So, I don't know, I think listening to other people is something that definitely comes easier to some people, comes harder to some people. I
Mhm.
think the thing that makes me really the big thing I take away from this is actually, you know what? Let's understand other people. And he says on 293, and then be understood. And that's something that I'm actually bad at, right? I can go and I can listen to other people
Mhm.
and try to like really empathize and put myself into their shoes and understand where they're coming from. But then actually getting my ideas across so that it I'm still struggling to be understood.
Yeah, no, no, I mean, and that's perfectly fine. He introduces that concept of psychological error,
Mhm.
and that's what you're seeking. That's what we're all seeking, and I think that's what makes this habit really hard, is that you might be in a situation where you're, out of breath, right, psychologically, and you're just looking for someone to listen to you. You're right? Um, and so I think that's probably the hardest part about starting this habit is you need to give the other person the psychological air first
Yeah.
before you do it. And of course you can say, well, why do I have to be the first one? Why can't they? Blah, blah, blah. And it goes back to that same argument. Well, if you're going to expect them to do it for you, then you need to be ready to also do it for them at least sometimes.
I also
Right.
think this comes back to habit 1, right? Which is in your circle of influence, you can control how you
Yeah.
do in this interaction, right?
Yeah.
If you can
Yeah.
control your thing, maybe you can start influencing other people,
Yeah.
right? But you can't really control them.
Yeah. No,
So
no.
don't focus on that area, right?
That is you are literally nailing it. I love it. Don't think you have no control over convincing them of your viewpoint. Like they need to decide to do that. That's out of your circle of influence. But what is in your circle of influence is taking a step back and understanding them,
Yep.
right? That's the whole point of this habit. You nailed it. Yeah.
I'm gonna list 3 quotes that stuck with me that I think are solid pieces of this, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So the first is on 276. Unless you're influenced by my uniqueness, I'm not going to be influenced by your advice, right? And this
Yeah.
is from the other person's perspective, right?
Yeah.
Unless you actually understand where I'm coming from,
Yeah.
like your advice is silly,
Yeah.
right? It's
Oh,
like the
yeah.
parent telling their child, you know, you really got to focus on school,
Yeah.
right? And not understanding that the kid is actually trying and they're struggling, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
wanna focus, but your advice is really to you as a child, not to them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, this happens to me a lot too. There's been so many times in my life where, like, I'll go to someone for, like, advice or something, and, like, I'll start telling them my problem, and they'll give me advice, but it's like, it has nothing to do with my problem. Like, in retrospect now, understanding what, like, being autobiographical in your responses means, like, I can look back now and go, "Yeah, that's what they did, because like,
Mhm.
they didn't try to understand what my problem was. They tried to diagnose my problem without even knowing what it meant.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's what that quote is, and it's so powerful, you
Now
know?
that being said, just to make this full circle in some ways, when other people give you their advice, you're still, I think, filling the emotional piggy bank between you 2, right?
Yeah,
By listening to their advice, it might not be really what you want or need
yeah,
at that point because they don't
yeah,
really understand where you're coming from. But at least when they do it, you're strengthening that connection, and maybe one day you'll finally understand each other and be able to have
yeah,
a truly win-win situation.
yeah, yeah.
Um, the second quote that I really like was on 278, the essence of empathic listening is not that you agree with someone. It's that you fully, deeply understand that person emotionally as well as intellectually, right?
Yeah.
So you might disagree with the conclusion that they come to, right? But you actually understand more or less why they came to that conclusion,
Yeah.
right? Um, I think that's really important, right? You
Yeah.
don't that just because you understand somebody doesn't mean you have to agree with them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, and on the same way, just because they agree with you doesn't mean that you understand them,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, and on that page too, yeah, right before that, those quotes, he's talking about the different levels of listening,
Mm.
and like
Right. He has this whole like 4 levels, was it?
yeah, four levels, yeah. So it is practice. It's pretending. We go, yeah, right, right, yeah, yeah. We do selective listening. We hear only certain parts of the conversation.
Yeah. Right. Uh huh. Uh huh.
Or we
Yeah.
practice attentive listening. We pay attention and focus energy on the words that are being said. Now, and this is a thing. I do think a lot of people, well, maybe not a lot, but I do think people do attentive listening, at least in some points in their lives or not, especially
Hmm.
when someone's really upset or, really looking for some sort of emotional help. You will be an attentive listener. You will listen to them.
Hmm.
But he says the last level, which is the fifth level, it is the empathic listening, and very few people actually go beyond that and do the empathic listening. Um, and yeah, I think I don't know if I ever really before I read this book, I had no idea what like empathic listening was, right? Um, but there's like a whole nother book that I think or is it a concept? I think there's a book. It's Emotional IQ.
What is emotional IQ?
Emotional IQ is like people who are emotionally intelligent, right?
Hmm.
They have the capabilities to figure out how people feel,
Hmm.
right? And there's like a whole concept that I think there was a whole book on it. And I think that reminds me a lot of this like empathic listening,
Mm.
and which is just being able to listen to a person and not only listen to them but actually like understand how they feel emotionally and
Hmm.
how they what help they need, and what advice they might need in that specific situation based off of how they feel,
Hmm.
you know and so your quote that you have later on, I have that underlined too. I think it's this. I thought it was really good.
The other quote that I have related to empathic listening is on 279.
Mm.
And that's empathic listening is so powerful because it gives you accurate data to work with. I feel like once you have the word data, you're going to appeal to somebody
Oh,
like
yeah.
DevOps data, right? No, but
Yeah, yeah. I'm data
but
driven.
yeah, but but the fact is, like how you see other people, how you understand their arguments
Yeah,
is based on how you understand them, right? And so ultimately, if you want a true and accurate picture of where they're coming from, you need to actually listen to them.
yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting.
He also talks about the emotional piggy bank and it
Mhm,
being like a huge deposit, which is exactly what you were just saying before. I think that's what makes this habit also like super helpful tool if
mhm,
you're looking to build those emotional piggy banks that we were talking about before. But like you're really struggling, you don't know how to do it, you know. I think this tool right here, just listening to people and giving them that psychological air that I was just talking about. That alone is just huge, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, I actually I read I don't know, it was like an article or something or a YouTube video. I just read just the other day, and I was like, that is perfect for the seek first to understand. Um, Basically it was like this whole story about an army base, and there was a leader, a sergeant in control of the army base, and everybody who was at the army base, like all of the men that was in that tended to the base, they were all required to come into his office and give him a complaint.
Mhm.
It could be anything. It could, whatever they have to complain about. They have 5 minutes to complain. And everyone was required. They had to do it. And so it was the person telling the story was a guy who just entered the army base, and he was like, I don't understand. So the first time he went in, he tried to be like super polite. He went in, he did his like, at ease. The sergeant, he walks into the office, the sergeant, looks at him, no paper or anything on the desk, and goes, "What's your complaint?" And so he formulated a perfect response. He said that there wasn't enough time for the gym for people to work out, and that the gym needed to be big enough. And the sergeant said, "Okay, you're dismissed." And he walked out of the office. He didn't write anything down. He didn't do anything. And he was like, "I don't understand." He didn't even like take my complaint and write it down somewhere. And so every week, he comes in, and he actually got more and more absurd with his complaints, because he was like, I just don't understand. And he was getting more frustrated. And so finally, his complaint was like, "I find these meetings useless. What's the point of this? You don't even write it down." And the sergeant said, "Come on over." And he opens up a drawer, and he pops this big notebook down of every single complaint. And he goes, you complained about the vending machine not having a certain type of candy. That same complaint has happened 35 times over the past 10 weeks." And he like goes through all of them, and he has like them all listed out. He's like, you know, I don't know if I can do anything about this, but I'm just giving you guys the air to complain. And if I can do anything about it, I will, but I can't promise it. And so the worst case I can do is let you complain about it. And apparently he was able to get like all of these things done, which made everybody happier. And so the morale was up. But like I thought that was a perfect example of like somebody just giving people the psychological air, right? To like listen to them and trying to actually do something about it, and did. And they all felt heard, and they apparently it was a higher morale. Now I don't know if this story is true or not, but I think I do think it's a really interesting story and like a really great idea. Um because he was getting in front of the problems before they were really problems, right? He was
Yep.
allowing people to come in and complain when they were just small issues and they haven't like boiled up into something.
That's
And
one of
so,
the sorry.
no, go ahead.
That's one of the reasons that I think companies that have policies like one-on-ones end
Mm,
up being more successful.
yeah,
Now, I don't know if there's statistics to prove that companies with one-on-ones do better,
yeah,
but I certainly prefer to work at companies where there's one-on-ones.
yeah,
And one of the reasons is that when you have that room where you talk to your manager and you say, "Hey, here are the things that are bothering me," or "Hey, nothing's really bothering me right now." You kind of have some rapport with the manager, and if the manager does something that you disagree with, you
yeah,
still, because you've had those conversations, you say, "You know what? He's heard me.
yeah,
Maybe he didn't think this was a good idea, but it's from a place of respect."
yeah,
If you don't have those meetings and things happen,
yeah,
a lot of times there's just no time to build that emotional piggy bank,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And so when things happen where there's big deposits, big withdrawals, right? Things will break down, trust breaks
yeah,
down, right?
yeah.
So, that is kind of the point of one-on-ones, and I do think that um, a lot of people who don't take advantage of it don't realize that it's I don't know. I don't wanna put this on like anybody. But I do think that people who don't have one-on-ones tend to be less happy with their job, and I think it
Yeah.
tends to be from a place of, uh, decisions are happening without me.
No, you're 100% correct. I feel the same way. I honestly feel if I don't have one-on-ones with my manager, I feel lost. Again, it gets back to the I don't have the psychological air. I feel like, even if that nothing comes of it. Now, what I find really interesting is one-on-ones. I it's really hard. I At a lot of companies that I go to, I find people are afraid to complain to their managers.
Huh.
Right?
Really? Oh, I
Yeah.
complain to my managers all the time.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, yeah, but that's the thing is, at a lot of places I go to, the managers will have one-on-ones, but the employees will be so, like, afraid to say anything negative that they just always say positive things.
Hmm.
And, I don't know I don't know who could be to blame or if there is anyone to blame, but, I do find that as a sign that, the manager hasn't built enough of a, emotional bank of trust with their employees that they're willing to open up.
It could also be because you have companies with things like stack ranking, right?
Yeah.
And you have I've heard stories of people who in some quote unquote like anonymous um report every year that the company does that measures like how happy are you with the company,
Yeah.
that people will get axed if they don't rate themselves high enough on
Exactly.
that, right?
Yeah, yeah,
There are definitely situations where people have probably internalized that it's safer to not speak my mind, right?
yeah,
Now, I think with my limited experience that it is safer to speak my mind so
yeah,
that nothing is hidden.
yeah,
Everything's on the table.
yeah,
There's no secrets. I
yeah,
think that the fact that there's no secrets tends to help me build connections with other people. And me saying a negative comment is actually proof that our relationship is so strong.
yeah.
And if our relationship's strong, then there's nothing to fear.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, so what I ended up always doing at these companies where, like, everyone else was afraid to tell the truth, like, because I would build these relationships with all these people who would tell me their complaints, and whenever I had the one-on-one with my manager, I would just pretend like that's my complaint. And try to get him to change things because I don't want to go like, oh well, this is what everyone's telling me, because then you end up in that no-win situation where they're like, well, they're not telling me, so you're lying to me, or why are they telling you this and not me? Like, it always ends up in this like free fall. So it was always just easier for me to be like, this is my complaint. But
Right,
can we
right.
do can we do something about
You're
it?
actually taking other people's complaints because you're like, I'm fine with this situation, but they're not, and
Well, that's
I don't
not
want
no, 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 I would say about 90% of the time it was also my complaint, but
to.
I would not say anything unless I knew other people also had that issue. Then I would be like, "Okay, this is bad enough that we should do something about it."
Interesting, interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so since this is a my habit that has changed my life, my strongest one,
Yep.
um, I will give some tips to both you and our audience members of how I started my journey on seeking first to understand.
Mm,
Um, I think he mentions this as a couple different strategies in the book, so maybe it's just a reiteration of what he said. But when you first start this, the one thing that I started when I started doing this is just repeat back to people what they said,
yep,
right? And yes, it is annoying. People will get frustrated with you if they realize it's some sort of strategy you're doing. But with that being said, if you're doing it with good intentions, then you can also just explain that to them and say, "I'm just trying to understand where you're coming from. So you're saying this, right?"
yep,
And that's how I started with this one. Is just kind of repeating back to what people's complaints or things, and I wanted to understand their viewpoints. Perfect example, you're a DevOps engineer and they come to you every single time the build fails, and you think that they should be trying to troubleshoot this a little bit further, but they're not,
yep.
right? And so talk to them and say, you can say, "Hey, why don't you troubleshoot this?" And they go, "No, I'm not going to troubleshoot this." All right. And then, then you can start having that conversation with them. It's easier, I think his son mentions it in the extra part.
Mhm.
But he says have these talks on the phone or in person.
Mhm.
Don't do this over email. Don't do this over Slack. Once you start, I think that's another actually,
Yeah, that was
especially right
a
now.
really good tip
Yeah,
in the
don't.
afterwards with his son, which was
Yeah,
like, this was written in 1989, there was a
yeah,
little bit of that stuff now,
yeah,
but in
yeah.
the
It's
modern world,
perfect.
oh my gosh.
Do not 100%, if you're going to take anything from this habit, do not have an emotional conversation over Slack, text message, Teams, whatever it is. Do not do it. Call once you start detecting a conversation is getting emotional, huddle them, call them, get into the office. Um, I think this is actually a really easy trap, especially for people who work remotely.
Mm,
You don't, the big thing everyone pushes is async. Always have async meetings. Don't waste time having synchronized meetings. But, you can't going back to one of the previous habits, you cannot optimize relationships.
yep,
If you optimize relationships, you will destroy them. So take the time. I know it's frustrating and you have to break context, but have your emotional conversations over a video call or just something verbally,
yeah, like you said, or like he said before, in habit 3, you can be efficient with things, but you can be effective with people, right?
Yeah.
If you wanna be efficient with people, it's gonna
Yeah.
be a bad time.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how I started, just, make sure you do, even just start. I think that's actually a hard thing that people have. Um, People have a hard time detecting emotional conversations. And so
Mm,
that might even be a good first step too,
yep,
because this habit really hinges on you recognizing when you're having an emotional conversation or not.
yep,
And if you have a hard time just detecting when a conversation's emotional, that might be like first really good steps is to pay attention more intentionally to some of your conversations. And when you start detecting them that they become a little bit more emotional, recognize that and get on the phone,
yep.
you know?
One of the things that this makes me think about really quick is that it can be really hard when you're having an emotional conversation with somebody and you want to understand where they're coming from and they kind of shut down,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
You say, I just want to understand, I'm trying to understand where you're coming from. And they say, oh, like maybe your emotional bank account is depleted, right?
Yeah.
And they're just frustrated. And they're like, I don't want to talk about this,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I think that can be a really difficult situation, right?
Yeah.
Because but the point with this habit is don't then go and explain yourself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Where you're coming from, right?
That's good.
If
Yeah.
if they if they are too tired to explain themselves to you,
Yeah.
right? Maybe leave it there, right?
Yeah, if they're too tired to explain themselves to you, then they are way too tired to listen to
Listen to
whatever the
your
hell you have
explanation.
to say.
Yeah.
Just recognize that.
Yep.
They're not gonna listen, so why waste your breath?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
if it's just because you wanna scream at a whiteboard, then scream at a whiteboard. Don't do it to
Or a
them.
wall or in a cave or
Yeah,
under a
yeah,
bridge.
yeah. No, that's good, I like it.
So,
But yeah, no, I think he mentions that, right? I think he uses the example of, parents with children.
mhm,
Your children aren't gonna always open up to you, and if they don't, then you can't push it and you can't get upset. You just gotta go, "Okay, not a big deal. I'm here when you wanna talk."
yep,
And I think that's really important to do that. I've had people I've had situations where haven't wanted to talk to people, when I'm, like, really upset. I just kinda wanna, forget about it. and people will get mad at me for not opening up to them. And like, it's kind of like, dude, do you understand? You're making things even worse now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
I mean, the simplest thing is, build up these emotional piggy banks, and you'll
Yeah.
have a lot more freedom to actually have these conversations,
Yeah. Yeah. So for our listeners, that is the end of our Habit 5
Yeah.
conversation. Seek first to understand. So next week, we will talk about Habit 6, synergize. The nice little catchy word. So if you're reading along, you know, read the next Habit 6. If you're just listening, then I guess just wait till next week and then pop on the next podcast.
I'll just say we are close to the end of this series, and let us know what you think. And if
Yeah.
we got anything wrong, well,
Yeah.
let us know, because we can't improve until we understand where you're coming from. So,
And we'll try to understand you first before we try to make you understand us. And that was our containerized conversation. I'm Jesse Caffarelli.
I'm Josh Warhurst. Have a great night.